Hello and welcome. I'm Charles Aite. To our first story, the Bank of Ghana has indicated the cedi is to start stabilizing against the dollar in the next 2 weeks. This will be as a result of the series of measures outlined by the central bank aimed at the local currency's depreciation and checking the continuous hike in inflation rate. Philip Abredu-Otu is head of research at the Bank of Ghana, and he's been speaking to Joy Business on this and other policy measures announced by the central bank.
If you looked at the governor's statement, what the governor did or what the Monetary Policy Committee did was to deploy an interest rate tool and complement that interest rate tool with a macroprudential measures to try to address the challenges that we have. So if I should put it in a different way, we use both price and quantity tools to address the problem. So we raised the policy rate by 250 basis points. We expect that to trickle down to the markets almost immediately because that is the rate at which we are going to lend to the banks when the banks come to the central bank for accommodation. And what we did as far as the macroprudential measures were concerned was to first move the cash reserve ratio from 8% to 12%. You may recall that following the pandemic, there were banks that did apply to the Bank of Ghana for some relief measures to pay dividends to their shareholders. Now, for those banks that applied for these relief measures, we relaxed the cash reserve ratio to 10% for them. So within the industry, some were maintaining a cash reserve ratio of 8, whilst others were maintaining a cash reserve ratio of 10%. Whichever way you look at it, we've moved it from 8 to 12 in some instances and from 10 to 12 in some instances.
Mr. Abredu-Otu, sorry to come in here, and I want to get some understanding. It appears that yesterday you deployed two, and I'm breaking it down maybe to the layman's term, you use two sets of toolkits in trying to control the development on the market. Yeah. One was the policy rate, and then the other was the other banking measures, or is it the macro measures that you're using?
Yeah, they call them the macroprudential measures.
Now, help me out. Yeah. Why these two sets of modules? Because we're expecting that being the interest rate being that high, yeah, that should be enough to get the results that the Bank of Ghana or the Monetary Policy Committee was looking at.
Well, it depends on the transmission. You know, the interest rates has an immediate impact on the commercial banks, and then the general public then interfaces with the commercial banks through the demand for loans, and that also gets transmitted to the rest of the economy. The issue is that between the two policy tools, the speed of act on the economy is a little bit different if you look at it too. The macroprudential measures effective April 1. There was a time lag that was given for these things to begin to take effect. So they begin taking effect April 1. But George, let me also add that I think the picture is being created as though these are new policy measures that are being brought on board. But this was the situation that existed prior to the pre-pandemic. Yeah. And what we did was to relax these regulatory reliefs to give liquidity to the banks to enable them to provide relief to the rest of the economy. What we are doing at this MPC round is to just claw them back. We are clawing them back because there are liquidity concerns, and these liquidity concerns are acting through the economy and creating all these imbalances. So we are clawing them back and putting them back where they were pre-pandemic. The only new thing that we've done is to raise the cash reserve ratio to 12%. And that is the only new thing that has been done.
You talked about liquidity concern, and since you're engaging somebody who plays with data and all the rest, has the committee and the Bank of Ghana being able to establish that there's so much liquidity out there coming on the back of COVID, where we thought that there wasn't much in the system. Just within this period, have we seen liquidity being so loose or so much, if you can use that expression, that you believe that these actions should be taken now?
Well, George, if you look at the commercial banks' excess reserves holdings, which we don't normally talk about, they are awash with a lot of liquidity. And when this liquidity sets down, they try to find work to do. They could do all sorts of things in the economy. They could chase effects on the markets because that is a spending power. And you know, these liquidity have come about because of the way things work and the way the transmission works. We at the height of the pandemic, you recall that the central bank provided an asset purchase program of 10 billion. And then we also saw the rapid credit facility of almost $1 billion. These are huge splurge of liquidity into the economy, and they work slowly in the economy. So they've moved through the economy, and they are sitting on the commercial banks' reserves here at the central bank. And so from the commercial bank's point of view, there is excess liquidity in the economy.
And you believe that these actions can control or tame that?
Well, they will. They will, especially the macroprudential ones, clawing them back. Although it's a reversion back to where we were pre-pandemic, the action in itself is taking something back from the banks. The additional 2% will claw back something from the bank. The lowering of the cash buffers on the capital adequacy ratio. Remember, we lowered it from 3%. There's a capital conservation buffer that the banks are supposed to keep on their capital adequacy ratio, and we had 3% buffer. That 3% buffer is designed to help the banks withstand shocks. We lowered that to 1.5%. Invariably, we gave them back 1.5% of that amount. Okay, now we are taking that one back. It's a drain on liquidity on the banks.
Have you done the extrapolations to establish the possible timelines with respect to these two modules that you have deployed? All other things being equal, we are first talking about immediate and all the rest. What are the timelines, the range that you're looking at that these policy measures would impact the market and the necessary correction would take place?
Well, George, as you speak, the increase in the policy rate is immediate. So immediately we announce policy changes, and the banks come to the central bank the following day, it takes effect. So the increase in the policy rate from
14.5%
to 17.5% is immediate. Today, when they come to that window to borrow, it's immediate.
Okay.
I think the question is how fast the commercial banks will then pass on this to the rest of the economy also remains another topic for discussion. But it's immediate. And again, the macroprudential measures, we give a time lag of maybe 2 weeks, April 1 to begin. And when that starts, that is also immediate.
I asked this question in the sense that you were targeting two main things, apart from the liquidity issue. One was the taming the city's depreciation and inflation. And that was why I was asking that, for instance, where should we start seeing the signs that it is getting to the market? At least first, we'll see the city more slowing the rate of depreciation a little bit, and then stability, and then inflation. We will see that the month-on-month numbers will be correcting and all the rest. I mean, from all the data and the extrapolation that you've done, how or when should we see these measures hitting these two main things that you are trying to deal with?
The exchange rate could be immediate and in the very short near to short term. For inflation, I think...
That is 1 month, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Some have said that immediately a week or 2 weeks, that should hit the market. Is that something that the Bank of Ghana shares in terms of these timelines when it comes to the exchange rate?
Well, we do.
And so what time are you looking at?
Probably from 2 weeks downwards, we should begin to see the markets reacting to the policy change. Sentiments will begin to change. The speculative elements will begin to die down. Already, if you heard the governor was saying that the exchange rate is in an overshoot. And anything that shoots up comes down.
Help me out with some education. That was a very interesting analysis that the governor sought to give, that we've seen the West, so don't expect any significant depreciation again. Interesting, some would say.
Well, because the exchange rate, like we always say, moves along with the fundamentals. And there's always a long-run trend for the exchange rate, okay, that are consistent with the fundamentals. Now, if you see the exchange rate moving way above where we think it should be, consistent with the fundamentals, it tells you there's a problem of an overshoot. That overshoot could be some speculative elements moving it above where it's supposed to be. Of course, there is stress in current macroeconomic conditions, and that stress affects confidence. The confidence then begins to impact on speculative activities, and that could overshoot the exchange rate. All over in the world, when exchange rates overshoot, they come down. So you heard the governor. The governor was confident that probably the worst is over.
And speculators were being warned that, listen, be careful, your days are over.
Yeah.
And that is what we should be expecting.
Yeah.
Let's look at the bit about inflation as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what lag time are you looking at maybe to look at how that could also impact the market based on the policy rate and even the macro-prudential measures, which some have said that is quite tough and hard?
No, so if you look at the inflation and you look at the analysis that were done during the meeting and which staff presented, the indication was that if no action is taken regarding the current inflation profile, we could see inflation move up till and then remain quite elevated all the way through to the end of 2022, and then probably into the first and second quarters of 2023. That is the baseline case scenario. If no.
And that was George Rafi interaction with the head of research at the Bank of Ghana. Quite detailed explanation there regarding reasons behind the measures put in place to arrest the city's depreciation. Well, away from that, today we follow the story of a female carpenter defying the odds of gender disparity to compete fiercely with her male counterparts in the carpentry business. James Eshan in the following report visits with Joyce Boama, a young and ambitious apprentice who aims to establish her own carpentry enterprise to employ other females who may be marginalized in this field of carpentry. Here's what he found.
The phenomenon of sex segregation in labor markets in so many growing economies still exists. However, some ladies have taken it upon themselves to overcome what we call occupational segregation. We're here to speak to 22-year-old Rejoice and her colleagues on why they chose carpentry apprenticeship. Let's interact with them.
Rejoice liked art back in senior high school, but it never really dawned on her to do carpentry because the venture was traditionally considered as male-dominated. She later found interest in the making of sofa because of her love for woodwork. I asked her about how she got started and what it's really like.
I have the intention of being a graphic designer now, and I did visual art in SHS. So I was not having the opportunity to go into it, so I tried to engage myself in this I was not picked, and due to financial problems. This one too is related to the graphic designing work. That's why I'm into it. Because I know what I want for myself, and way back in school, it's only guys that we used to work with. Yeah, we are only 3 girls.
With a love for art, she intends to go back to school and add more value to the carpentry work she does. She's not just into woodwork, but she also does sewing of the leather for the sofa.
I sewed the cover for the stuffing chair, and I helped the guys to cut the frames. I help in paperworks and foam works for the finishing.
So with this is a leather.
This is a leather, yeah, the cover for the sofa.
So after sewing this, where are you taking it to?
After sewing this, we'll use it to do the finishing.
I just want to know what keeps you going.
I want to become something great in future. So I'm doing this to support myself. And in the next 2 to 4 years, I see myself to become a great graphic designer to support this one.
Joyce is not the only lady into verse, but work closely with her colleagues, Mary and Sister Ta. They've been into carpentry for a year and over. They share their experience as ladies into carpentry and basically the making of sofa.
I'm building a frame to tighten up the wood. It's a flexible support surface which is needed for the sitting area and the back area. I started a year ago. People admire us for what we do and always encourage us. I am happy to do this.
Oh, there be a crowd need the woman who say a botai, no more say a or move. Obi credit me back. Sir, and my man and my yen say, what to me, Bejana Hoshas, I am a fair crack.
Me pa cho me here from work. We say near Capoda.
I am creating a
Capoda just say e kunya ni
additional
say ya wo
to the sofa. This is where you keep your
and I make chat
arm
to
while
kuro bi
sitting
so
on
ha.
the sofa.
What am I mean chat to kuro no?
I don't know my stop any.
Ya fe ha na na wo drink bi a ye de ade be shim to take cup to wo drink bi a na ade. Oh, how many
We get a lot of money
This
out of
sounds
this.
intense.
I
You
am
tell
married,
about it, yeah.
but my husband is okay with what I do, and I have
Me
4
ma kura ka
kids.
kan school so wo ma me ye carpenter. Nti ya teacher for no kura so be di e kira be ho ma me adwuma kro na o ye. Me tumi de bi hwe fie kama.
George is the owner of the shop. He speaks on the feedback he gets from people with regards to working with ladies.
Initial first name for Emma, because now man who say carpenter money a man man. Baby, I'm not first time in Hong Kong. And
We were not considering female apprentices when we started because it was seen as a male-dominated profession. But a lady submitted an application to join us, so I decided to give it a try. And it worked. She was phenomenal. Due to that, I realized ladies could actually do carpentry.
Now, fine. The sister never a reason why I was starting to say Wofa and Kaifon. What in Kaifon ever count? Ejuma to say.
na time omo di bedwuma no obaka so ya de a na ho keka no sometimes me compare omo to.
The ladies are very punctual. They bring in more customers.
Ne ya ho keka mo di be adwuma no okọ break an sisi anu oduru ho omo ni ku adwuma no ho nti ya no ti ma mani age e ma no ho a me fa
omo to be customers be bro
pa eno de sometimes cry say cars e twem ho hey do oba na ya adwuma say no more crow money to no nipa ejina jina no more hwe wo Ghana ye koye nimpa titiro ne adwuma me ne me.
I also have other nationals I work with, not just the ladies.
Bebre wa ha omo nyina wa ha me no mo na ye adwuma.
This is what Rejoice and her colleague does on a daily basis. They produce the very best of sofa you need at home. This indeed tells what a man can do, a woman does better. For Joy Business, James Ishen.
Indeed, you're still watching The Marketplace. Well, today on Tech Business, we have a discussion about non-residential digital platforms and taxation. The GRA has hinted at spreading the tax net to cover the use of digital platforms that are not exclusive to Ghana, for example, Netflix, third-party payment platforms, among others. To help us best understand the directive is our regular host, Henry Kobler, lead of tech firm Eyes of Africa. Henry, grateful that I could join us. For the purposes of those hearing this for the first time, what's a non-residential digital platform?
Thank you very much, Charles. So when we say non-residential digital platforms, we're referring to platforms that are not resident here, businesses that are not originally registered as Ghanaian businesses. And so they would originally be residing in other countries, but could extend their platforms to the usage in Ghana. So when you pick a platform like Netflix is really not registered as a Ghanaian company, but we have a lot of Ghanaians really using the services of Netflix. There are quite a number of these platforms that could reach out to the locals in Ghana and could have their services really used. You can have platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram being used in terms of advertisements. And so all of these platforms are generating some level of income from Ghanaians. And so they sort of seem to be non-residential, but be extending their platforms towards Ghanaians.
Well, the GRA will from April 1st target some taxes from these platforms. You're a tech expert. How sustainable will this be?
Okay, so for me, I'm generally always in for taxes. I always encourage the government to find innovative ways to push in taxes. But my point, especially with this in terms of sustainability, looks at how these platforms are being used, especially in Ghana now. It's on the infancy stage where a lot of people are adapting. If you pick a platform like Netflix, not a lot of people are having Netflix accounts, but quite a lot of people are jumping on to understanding how to use Netflix and would be enjoying the content on it. And so you would have the revenue generation on it not being so much, but also at the infant stage. Quite a number of platforms like Facebook advertisement, Jumia, quite a lot of people are starting to just jump onto these platforms. And so at the early stages where there is a taxation regime, really scares quite a number of the users to be able to make use of the platforms that are there. And so for me, it wouldn't really give 100% sustainability point. I would just rate it almost about 40%, where you might be able to just gather because there's some people sort of addicted to it already. But it's really at the infancy stage. And I think that really when we're looking at such platforms, we should look at more innovative pointers to be taxing and getting the usage up rather than just going directly. I saw the news on that, which mentioned that from 1st April, and there's no breathing spaces for some of these platforms. What happens to some of these platforms that have to sync to the portal to now pay these taxes? I mean, are they going to sync their portals to have access to data, access to their customers' data and all of that? I mean, there's some level of work that needs to be done to be able to link to a lot of the platforms that are out there.
Great. Well, what innovative ways, Henry, can government make to rake in more revenue from, aside from non-residential digital platforms as we've been discussing?
Funny enough, I would say education. It's important that you educate a lot of the customers and especially the citizenry on taxes and even the usage of these platforms. Already the government is benefiting from communication taxes on internet usages, which actually connects to some of these services. And so there's some level of revenue that is already being generated by the government. And I think that there's been a lot of talk and memes where quite a lot of people are making fun of the government always just taxing. So education really comes at a point where you sort of tune the mindsets of people to the point where they get to really have a good access to some of these platforms, the education and why they need to be taxed and how the taxes really affect their daily lives. And so education really comes in for me as a first point. Secondly, proper policies are supposed to be put in place to relatively make sure that these platforms also feel very comfortable to be able to give out their services at their best and be able to declare the right taxes that they sort of have in connection with their services. If you don't put in the proper policies, a lot of people will sort of evade the taxes and will try and find means around it, and which will not be to the proper sustainability of the project. And so these two things, education policy, relatively comes first for me, getting the citizenry to understand these tax regimes and why they basically need to be in place, growing the ecosystem, growing the ecosystem for people to be able to engage themselves in this digital media would be one of the best ways where you can have a lot more usage to this platform, which can then translate into a proper tax collection point for the GRA.
Henry, as always, grateful to have your thoughts on matters regarding tech, and he's a regular host on Tech Business each and every Wednesdays and Fridays to give you updates on basic things you need to know about trends in the world of tech. That's how we end today's edition of the Marketplace as well. But for more news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. I'm Charles Aite. Many thanks for watching.